Magnus Carlsen was up 9 points of material and still lost to Hans Niemann. This is the game that shocked the chess world. Welcome, chess fans, to another guided game. Today, we're looking at one of the most dramatic moments from the 2024 World Blitz Championship, the final knockout on New Year's Eve, December 31st. Hans Niemann, rated 2734, faces Magnus Carlsen, the world number one at 2831. On paper, it looked like a mismatch. But this Sicilian Defense clash turned into an instant classic. Niemann goes down by 9 points of material and refuses to give up. Move by move, we'll watch how he turns the tables and delivers a stunning checkmate on move e41. This game is a lesson in resilience, active rook play, and never counting yourself out. White's e-pawn steps forward, grabbing the centre. Black's c-pawn hits back with c5, the Sicilian Defense, a classic battle for asymmetry. Knight to f3, developing with a threat on e5, supporting d4. Black's knight to c6 defends e5 and gets ready for action. Bishop to b5, the Rossolimo variation. It pins the knight on c6 and challenges Black's setup. Black pushes e5, grabbing space. That's a deviation from the main line, e6. Knight to c3 reinforces the centre and prepares to support the bishop. Black's d-pawn steps to d6, solidifying the long e5 pawn chain. Bishop retreats to c4, eyeing f7, avoiding any exchanges. Black's bishop to e7 develops, getting ready to castle. White's d-pawn to d3, shoring up the centre, opening a path for the c1 bishop. Black's knight to f6 attacks e4 and completes development. A small pawn move, h3, preventing any ng4 or bg4 ideas. Black castles kingside, tucking the king away. White's knight retreats to h2. It's rerouting to g4, planning to pester that knight on f6. Black responds bishop e6, developing and challenging the bishop on c4. The knight leaps to g4, attacking the f6 knight. Black plants a knight on d4, an aggressive central outpost, threatening c2 and eyeing some forks. White pushes a4, expanding on the queen side, maybe looking at b4 or a5 later. Black answers a6, putting the brakes on that advance. White exchanges knights, nx6 with check. This removes a defender and will disrupt Black's kingside once the bishop recaptures. Black recaptures with the bishop on f6, keeping the pawn shield intact. White's knight jumps into d5. It hits the bishop and plants itself on a dominant central square. Black strikes with b5, breaking White's queenside grip and attacking the a4 pawn. White takes on b5 and Black's knight recaptures, staying active on the queenside, eyeing the c3 square. Bishop to d2 quietly develops, connecting the rooks, aiming to slide over to a5. Black replies bishop g5, pinning the knight on c3 and adding pressure. Bishop a5 hits the rook on d8 and ties Black down. Black's queen slides to b8, guarding the rook and eyeing the b-file. White castles kingside, securing the king. Black swings his king to h8, stepping out of the g-file, anticipating tactics down the line. Queen to h5, aggressive, threatening f7, aligning with that bishop on c4. Black's bishop retreats to d8, defending the f6 pawn and breaking the pin on the c3 knight. White captures on d8. Bx d8, eliminating a key defender. Black's queen recaptures, landing on d8, looking to challenge White's queen. White opens the f-file with f4, attacking e5, trying to crack the centre. Black plays f6, shoring up e5, holding things together. White takes on e5 with the f-pawn, and Black's d-pawn recaptures, opening up the centre and freeing that bishop on c8. King to h2, a subtle move. It clears the g-file for a rook lift and tucks the king away from any potential checks. Black's knight to d6 hits the c4 bishop, forcing white to decide. White plays b3, supporting the bishop, preparing to open the a file later. Black pushes a5, fixing white's queenside pawns. White's knight returns to c3, finally escaping that pin and guarding key squares. Black takes on c4 with the knight, nxc4, winning the bishop pair. White's d-pawn takes back, opening the d-file for the rook. Black's queen invades d2, threatening the c2 pawn and eyeballing the back rank. White's knight to a4 defends c3 and gears up for active play. Black's queen grabs the c2 pawn, wins a pawn. White's knight snaps on c5, winning it right back and attacking the bishop on e6. Bishop f7 attacks the queen on h5, so white offers a queen trade with qd1, simplifying toward an endgame. Queens come off, qxd1. White recaptures with the rook on f1, keeping a rook on the open d-file. Black's rook slides to b8, doubling on the b-file and threatening rb2. White's rook lifts to a3, defending the third rank and getting ready to swing over. Black's rook to c8, defending the c7 pawn. White's knight hops to b7, harassing the rooks and looking to infiltrate d6. Black brings the other rook to b8, challenging the knight. White's knight jumps into d6, forking the rooks and attacking the bishop. Black's rook moves to c7, defending the 7th rank. White's rook snares the a5 pawn, restoring material balance and creating a passed pawn. Black's king returns to g8, keeping an eye on the king side. White's rook shifts to b5, attacking the rook on b8 and eyeing the 7th rank. Black's rook moves to a8, defending a7 and staying active on the back rank. White's knight captures the bishop on f7 with a check, but this is a mistake. The engine preferred ra1, keeping the pressure on. Black's king recaptures on f7, taking the knight and equalizing material. White pushes the c-pawn to c5, activating that passed pawn and opening lines for the rook on d1. Black's rook lands on a2, threatening the b2 pawn and tying white down. White plays b4, advancing the passed pawn and creating a second threat. Black's rook to b2 attacks the b3 pawn, but the engine flags this as a mistake. rc2 was more accurate, keeping the rook active. White's rook to b8 offers a trade, but the engine says rc1 was stronger, defending the c-pawn and keeping things coordinated. Black's rook takes on c5, wins a pawn, but allows White's rook to invade the 7th rank. White's rook slides to d7 with check, forcing the king to move, seizing the 7th rank. Black's king steps to e6, attacking the rook, but the engine says kg6 was the only move to stay alive. White's rook captures the g7 pawn, picking up a crucial pawn and activating the rook. Black's rook slides to c6, defending the 6th rank. White's pawn advances to b5, attacking the unprotected rook on c6, a nice tempo gain. Black's rook moves to d6, the decisive blunder. The engine's best defense was f5, which would have kept counterplay alive. White's rooks dominate the board, and Black's king is caught in the crossfire. One move delivers checkmate. Can you find it? Pause here and look for the finishing blow. Rook e8 is checkmate. The rook slides to e8, putting the king in check. There's no escape. Every flight square is covered by the rook on g7 and the advancing pawns. What can we take away from this? First, never resign when you're down material. Niemann was behind 9 points and kept fighting. Second, active rooks can salvage the bleakest endgames. His rooks on the 7th and 8th ranks spun a mating net Carlsen couldn't escape. The turning point? Carlsen's rd6. The engine says f5 would have held, The Sicilian is a battleground in master play, but even against a 130-game Sicilian expert like Carlsen, resilience and precise calculation can flip the script. Stay alert until the very last move. Thanks for watching this guided game. If you enjoyed breaking down this incredible comeback, hit subscribe and ring the bell. We post a new lesson like this every single day, digging into the most instructive games. See you in the next one.